Okay. Okay, folks. I tapped that a second time there because the ex-fire chief just returning from Doug and the Slugs over in Grand Forks there. Still looks a bit hazy, so. How'd that go anyway? Was it fun?
It was very good, thank you, yes.
Yeah. Justin was telling me he was there representing the radio station, so
Nice.
great turnout and everything.
We were telling each other.
Yeah, I know.
What happens in Grand Forks stays in Grand Forks.
Excellent. All right, so I'd like to call the meeting to order and start with the Aboriginal Acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge the land on which we are gathered as the traditional territory of the Tanaha, Silix, and Sinix peoples, and is home to Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honour their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. And with that, I'd like a motion to adopt the agenda, please.
I'd like to move.
With the removal of, I better get down there, the notice of motion from Councillor Charwood. That's coming off the agenda. Moved by Councillor Renwick, second by Councillor Woodward. Questions or comments? All in favour? Carried. And we're skipping the adoption of the minutes, as explained to us earlier tonight. They'll all be available at our next meeting. Okay, so no recommendations from the Committee of the Whole. And the first item on the agenda is a variance permit for Douglas Road and the development variance permit application for 41 Douglas Road to vary the zoning bylaw to reduce the front yard setback and vary off-street parking and landscape bylaw to reduce the required number of parking stalls. And Sebastian is here to give us a little bit of background on behalf of Development Services, and you've got the floor, my friend. Do we need more lights in here or anything?
No.
Maybe it's me. Yeah, there we go.
Whoops, sorry. Good.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, save it.
Saved the day.
Days are getting shorter.
Okay, so in front of council tonight is a variance request at 41 Douglas Road. And the variances are essentially to reduce the front yard setback and vary the off-street parking and landscaping bylaw, essentially reducing the required number of parking stalls. So 41 Douglas Road is a bit of a unique site in the sense that it sits quite a bit lower than the road, and so Development Services has been and Public Works has been working with the landowner and the proponent of this application for a number of years to find a solution to use this property and to develop it for the highest and best use. So there's been a number of iteration, and finally this was kind of ended up being the most feasible one, and the one that from our opinion worked the best and should have the least impact on the neighborhood and on our services. So essentially the proponent is looking to reduce the front yard setback from essentially 4.5 meters to 0 meters, and also to reduce the number of parking stalls per lot from 4 stalls to 2 stalls. And essentially these variances are, if we just look at the numbers, seem pretty, they're quite big. But if you look at the actual site and the plan, from our opinion, these are, they are consistent, and they meet the criteria for, meeting the general intent of the OCP. So first and foremost, the setback, it's really about how the lot is quite a bit lower than the road. So the setback aren't as intrusive, as most of the building will actually be below the road. And also in terms of parking stalls, so we're going from 4 stalls to 2 stalls per lot. But that being said, the actual layout and the actual suspended slab will accommodate the required 4 stalls per. But what happens is that technically 2 of those stalls are on City Boulevard, and therefore the variance is required. And we've done something similar on Trevor Street, maybe a year or 2 ago, similar situation. So that's a quick summary of the application in front of council, and I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Okay, so with that, thanks very much, Sebastian. There is a staff recommendation if somebody wished to move it. Councillor Lochtenberg, seconded by Councillor Charlwood. And if there are questions or comments, now is your opportunity from the mover and the seconder. From Councillor Charlwood.
I think it's an easy question, but both administration and public works mentioned insurance papers. And then in the recommendation, insurance isn't mentioned again, and I'm assuming that would be part of the owners. Would the onus be on them to insure those 2? Like, do they have to have separate insurance?
It's essentially it's a license to occupy because they will be occupying our lands. It happens fairly often throughout when we issue building permits or development permits. So that would be something that we would do at that point in time.
And it's our insurance or their insurance?
Oh no, it's they need to have it.
Right,
The
they just
city,
need to prove to us that they've
So
got
the city's
that.
an additional insured party.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward and then Councillor Page.
Thank you, Mayor. I was wondering about shadow studies on these builds. Has that been done yet, or will that be done at a later time?
No, it won't be done. I mean, essentially first of all, they're not requiring a height variance. They're in keeping with the height requirements. So we don't ask for shadow studies if the height is not increased. And secondly, the buildings are going to be actually closer to the road, thus reducing any impact they would have on the adjacent homes. So the study would not bring any new information because that's not the nature of the variance.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Page and then Councillor Morris.
Okay, hopefully this isn't too hard, but when we're looking at these bridge structures, because of the height situation and the permeable surface, do we consider these a permeable or non-permeable because they're suspended?
In terms of do they count for lot occupancy?
Yeah.
They don't. Driveways don't count for lot occupancy. However, in addition to, I guess I should say, lot coverage, we do have a minimum 30% needs to be permeable surface. So that will be reviewed at the building permit stage.
And supplemental?
Yeah.
So correct me if I'm wrong on the purpose of the front setback, but I interpret it as that urban streetscape desire to have your sidewalk, front yards, then buildings, and just so you don't feel enclosed in. And I'm looking at this hard surface that's being added in, what it's going to do for stormwater, what it's going to do for radiant heat, and the heat island effect. And I'm wondering, do we consider how we take these opportunities to look at what kind of vegetation will be provided to kind of fill in those other pieces of the non-built space for those streetscapes? Because this, I know we just have some very rudimentary renderings in front of us, but it does make me wonder as one walks down Douglas and what this looks like. And now you've got these 4 cars packed in there on the front, inside of that front setback, which in my mind is meant to create that space for gardens and lawns and shrubs and trees and that general neighborhood feel. And I don't see how we're compensating and capturing that when we're looking for design considerations here.
Well, in theory, what is being proposed for parking area is a requirement of our zoning bylaw. So in the case where if there is a lane, we do not grant a curb cut. Therefore, the driveway will be, or the property will be accessed through the lane for the most part. Where there's no lane, because of our zoning requirements requiring 2 parking stalls or 1 parking stall per unit. So in this case, each duplex need 4. they're basically just meeting the minimums in terms of creating that surface. The difference here, could it be gravel versus asphalt? I don't think this is going to be the design will probably require some sort of a high hard surface. But that being said, our landscaping standards require 30%, and there is a number of requirements there in terms of what kind of vegetation you can plant and what kind you can't. And essentially, the 30% needs to be permeable. So, you know, it's a bunch of different check boxes they need to check to obtain a building permit. And in the world we live in, it's, you know, we've debated parking many times at various meetings, and you know, they're meeting the parking requirements, and that's why they need to have that substantial structure in the front. I don't think there's any other way to accommodate that requirement on this lot.
So I'm kind of thinking more along the lines of what can be given in to bring back that vegetation, this piece of the streetscape that's being intruded upon inside of the frontscape, be it, I hate to say it, but green roofs or built-in planters, different kinds of pieces. So when you're walking this in 40 years, what else are we capable of kind of asking for in the design considerations to recapture those values that are being lost inside of that front setback?
Yeah.
Sebastian, I just, like, the challenge with, like, built-in planters, how do you enforce that after 5 years? What if the person doesn't plant, or their shrubs die, or all those sorts of things? So I think Development Services has considered the lot, the feasibility up on Trevor Street. We have these same type of driveways on Front Street here. You'll see we have some of those where it's trying to find that balance between, you know, having parking on, which, you know, Douglas is, you know, relatively busy for Nelson, I guess. It's not the highway. And how do you still maintain the, you know, the greenery? You know, I would suspect they're trying to sell these units and will do their best to have landscaping that is attractive to the homeowners, and hopefully you get homeowners that, you know, also want to maintain their landscaping. And it's a hard one to sort of hold on to over time. You could even put it in a green roof and you let it die, and it's, you know, does nothing at the end of the day. So, you know, I think, you know, they're, you know, through, as Sebastian said, through the permitting and landscaping bylaw, they'll make sure it's, you know, fits the policies of council, and you know, will fit with the neighborhood.
Thank you. Councillor Morrison.
Yeah, so I have a number of concerns about this application coming in. More probably around traffic than greenscape, but Douglas Road is a very busy road, and now you've got people with stacked cars in this parking arrangement. And you know, as we try to move away from the thought that everybody's going to have a car, I'm a firm believer that if you live in Nelson, you're going to own a car if you ever want to leave. So, you know, people are going to have vehicles. And I've gone and I've looked at this site. I've actually gone 2 days now in a row, and I've gone down High Street and I've gone down Union, and I've looked at this property. I even probably trespassed and walked down the stairs that lead to this property. But on Douglas Road, we have 3 homes only that, you know, have been there for a long time that require you to basically have to back out into Douglas. And where this house is orientated, it's very close to Gyro Park Road. And so I have a lot of concerns about backing out onto Douglas Road. And I don't see Douglas Road. Douglas Road, you know, we talk about, yeah, we have this on Trevor Street. Well, Trevor Street's just above my house, and I know the people that I fondly call having a pico deck for their driveway. That is a residential street. So, you know what, you can take all the time in the world to back out and contemplate backing out in that. You're not trying to dodge in between the traffic. I have to say that 2 years ago, I believe I asked, and I was very fortunate to get one because they weren't using it, to actually have a speed sign put on Douglas Road, because that's where I walk, that's where my husband walks, and sometimes it is like it's the highway. 50 is very seldom driven on that road, let alone the fact that the speed limit is 40 there. And I would think if we ever move to these electric vehicles that Councillor Page has talked about many times, and we'd be looking at 30. I mean, this is I don't know what the proper word is, Sebastian. This is like a connector route or a
Collector.
This isn't a laneway or a residential road. So I have some major concerns. And if we ever, when you look at a map and you look at that future plan of Nelson, if we ever get Trevor Street extended around, coming in behind the high school, that traffic is going to probably come down and more than not likely use Douglas Road as their way to access downtown. So as I see more development in the upper part of Fairview, I see more traffic on Douglas. We've also got kids walking to school on Douglas. This winter, when the snow was bad, and thankfully it's not bad every year, there was many times that we found ourselves walking on the road because the sidewalk became the snow bank. My other concern is the curb cut in terms of the change in the sidewalk when you have to put in these curb cuts to allow these people to access their driveway when we're trying to look at pedestrian ways. So a number of things come to mind that I have concerns about. I look at further down the road, and it's not Douglas, but we all, I think, probably call it Douglas, but it's actually Monroe at 1138 or 36, where there's a duplex there, and they come off of the road, and they have enough room that they can actually, and I'm sure it's tricky on some days, they can back their car around a little bit to then be able to pull out onto the main road, and that's just right above where Gyro Park Road comes in. And so I'm just wondering if there's any contemplation of that, and it leads me to remember a time when we talked about, and perhaps it was in the previous term of council, where duplexes somehow shared, and I was very confused when planning tried to explain it to me about sharing some kind of common wall, but it didn't really make it a fourplex. But I'm just wondering whether or not, if we were going to put this bridge to these houses in, that they couldn't join the bridge part to either, if we're going to have all these people there, have some more room to potentially turn a car around to point its nose out when it comes on to Douglas, or I actually, having looked at this lot, think that having a duplex there to match the duplexes that are on High Street that this developer also developed over a period of time, because this used to be one large lot, would be more attractive there. One last point, question I have is about, you comment that the house is going to be actually pulled back more onto the street side aspect to the Douglas Street part of that lot, and then we talk about 10 meters, but 10 meters is the average height, and I'm sort of thinking if you pull the house back far enough, then we're going to be using the 4 points to average out, and the front side of that house could actually be higher than 10 meters, if I'm not mistaken, on how we interpret the footprint of a house. So as you can probably tell, I'm not particularly in favor of this, any of these variances associated with this plan, but those are some of the concerns I have. I don't think there was a specific question in there, but I think that when we look at long-term development, we need housing, but there's a lot of impact about having this housing mass right there.
Thank you. Councillor Renwick hasn't had a chance.
Thank you.
And Councillor
I share Councillor Morrison's concerns on this, and I will also add this parking situation or setup where it's 2 and 2. I can speak to that with, well, I have that situation in downtown Nelson in the laneway behind the building, and it's parked like that 2 and 2, and there's only ever 2 cars parked in there. It's because people are inherently lazy, and that person doesn't want to have to get up and move their car so the other guy can get theirs out. I can just see this causing a war between the people downstairs and the people upstairs. And also, if there's only 2 cars parked there, the other 4 are going to be parked on the street along the other side, which isn't great, specifically in the wintertime. I'm sorry, I'm not in favor of this either.
Thank you. Councillor Lockton.
So I hear the concerns from my colleagues on this one, but I think I have a different view, and that's that. Well, number one, in terms of the parking, what I'm imagining is that the 4 units would share each a row, so you wouldn't have the issue of competition between units fighting for parking. So if I'm correct,
That's correct.
2 units, 2 stalls per unit.
Yeah.
And in general, when we're looking at parking minimums, I think the trend around the country, and I think this is probably where we'll end up too, is to eliminate parking minimums or certainly reduce them. So that idea of 2 parking spots per household hopefully will go away, and we'll end up with generally more single car families, and then possibly either shared cars or, other active transportation or other transportation solutions. So I'm not as challenged by the configuration of the parking, although I understand if it didn't work out, it could create all sorts of problems between the units. As far as Douglas Road goes, I understand very well how busy that road is, and adding traffic to that road is not something we want to do. And that's in keeping with, in general, the idea of trying to mode shift away from cars to other forms of transportation. And so I think that that's always going to be an issue with any development, and that the balance we're trying to strike here is between, how do we create a more livable, dense community? Because if affordability is, for many, if not for the community itself, are one of our biggest issues, one of the only ways we're going to get to a more diversified, economically diversified community is through multi-unit dwellings like this. And I think one of the letters we received did suggest how positive a multi-dwelling unit was for their community in terms of creating a more neighborhood feel. Beyond that, my concern is that we're going to, if we don't approve this variance, then what's the alternative? So providing housing for 4 families, that goes away because of the parking minimums and so on that we've talked about here. So we go to probably 1 unit. I mean, maybe they continue this subdivision and do get 2 units, but still it's at least half, if not down to 1 family. And I think that's 3 families that would be contributing to this community that wouldn't have a place to live. And I think these are the compromises we have to make going forward to create the community that has a broad representation of people of all economic backgrounds. And so I hear the challenges of the neighbors. I empathize with them, but unfortunately this is the kind of trade-off that we're going to have to keep making throughout our community going forward. So I'm in support of this, and yet, again, with sympathies to the neighbors about some of those difficulties around traffic and parking.
Further questions?
I know they're more statements than questions, but just maybe to back up, when we look at variances, there's a few things we look at. We look at what our OCP wants, and we keep hearing more housing choice, and highest and best use of land. So, to Councillor Luchtenberg's point, if this variance is not approved, like those homes as they are could be built, but they would be single family, reduced to parking, so just bigger housing product, less housing choice. They're single families. So essentially it could look the same. The driveways would be there. It wouldn't require variance because it would bring the parking counts down. So secondly to that, typically what you do a lot of transportation and planning looks at your busier streets, your collectors, and your arterial. That's where you start to transition to higher density. And the idea of transitioning to higher density is more activation on the street, more driveways. Right now, this whole area is just treed. It's pretty wide, so you can put a posted speed, but no, it will be hard for people to achieve it. But all of a sudden, if you start putting driveways there, you start seeing activities. As you're driving, you see things, and you just naturally slow down. So that's the concept between, traffic calming and having the right density along the right street. If you remove all the density, you're not solving the problem. People will drive faster. So those are some of the concepts we looked at. There was different things floated around kind of creating these driveway lanes, and we were more concerned about what it would do to the pedestrian landscape, the sidewalk, and also not being in keeping with the general area. So I just wanted to add that because council gets asked to really agree on these little technicalities, but we look at the bigger picture, and that's why we're in working with the proponent, we felt that this really matched the intent of the OCP, and therefore that's why we're bringing it to a favorable recommendation to council.
Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, just to add to what Sebastian is saying, I think if you think about it in your mind's eye going along Douglas, there are, especially more towards Hume School, there are a whole bunch of houses that have small little driveways that you pull off of Douglas into. I can think one in my mind's eye of, it's kind of a little bit like this. It's like they park on top of kind of a concrete bunker kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they have to pull out on a Douglas. So it already exists, and it's not like Douglas is a mess. Our topography is just a challenge, and this council has for 4 years said we've got to densify, we've got to have housing choice, and as Councillor Lautenberg said, there are sacrifices to be made in there. But I just want to point out that Douglas already has a whole bunch of
3.
very, very small.
3.
You counted them?
Yeah. Sorry, I did count them because I wanted to know how many there were.
Okay, but so there are 3, and Douglas is not a mess because of those 3. So I just feel like we're in a critical point in Nelson with housing, and we do have to be somewhat flexible to allow it to move forward.
Thank you. I just made a quick note there while we were speaking, and I can think of main corridors such as Houston Street, which is a number of properties where you back onto the road. In fact, most of them. Front Street has many. Gordon Road and Douglas Road and Vernon Street. And we did pass an OCP that directed staff to create opportunities for more density and create more opportunities for housing. And when we get to properties such as this one, this simply won't be developed unless there's economies of scale. They're just too steep and too tough to work with. And going forward, we all know that we're land poor in Nelson, and the bulk of the inventory that we have left, with the exception of a handful of lots in a few areas of town, are mostly steep and tough to build on, and they'll have to be built based on a return on the investment, otherwise they just won't be developed. So it's not new to back onto a road in this community. In fact, it's been around for a long time. So I'm going to ask council for a vote at this point in time on the resolution that's in front of us and the application for the development variance permit to vary the requirements of zoning bylaw 3199/2013 for the purpose of constructing 2 duplexes be approved for lot district lot 96 Kootenai District Plan EPP 89344 41 Douglas Road as per attached plans as follows. Zoning bylaw number 3199/2013, section 417, schedule A of off-street parking and landscape bylaw 3274/2013 and section 731. Do you want 1 and 2 together? Is that okay?
This is all together, yes.
All together, okay. To reduce the front lot line setback from 4.5 meters to 0 meters for both the proposed lots as per the attached plans. to reduce the minimum off-street parking vehicle parking requirements for a duplex for 4 stalls to 2 parking stalls as per lot, subject to the applicant achieving final subdivision approval, the final driveway design being approved by Nelson Hydro and Public Works, an easement agreement be registered on the title to the city satisfaction at the applicant's cost. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, next up is the Kootenai Climbing Association new facility. We've been talking about this for quite some time. This report presents the summary analysis of the research conducted by city staff to find a suitable location for the new climbing facility as proposed by the Kootenai Climbing Association. The Kootenai Climbing Association required a commitment from council to grant them the use of land to develop the proposed new climbing facility before it can move forward with this project. Council is now requested to consider providing 820 10th Street location as a site for this project. And there is a recommendation, folks,
I'll move.
and there's 3 of them, but we'll start with the, you're moving the recommendations that are in front of us then, Councillor Woodward?
Yes, I am.
I think we just need to modify the one about the lease. There's some notice provisions we have to
Yeah.
satisfied, so would you suggest as per our legislative requirements or something?
I think so.
If it's the third resolution, I think we could just add, subject to the city satisfying the legislative requirements.
Is that fine with the mover?
Yes.
We're moving one, aren't we?
No, well,
packing them all together?
they're all in the package here, but they'll be dealt with one at a time. But just to clear that up so we have some clarity on how the land's going to be distributed.
So I guess I'll just move 1 then? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Second.
Okay, seconder, Councillor Renwick. Okay, this is an opportunity to maybe if you need some clarity on this package, you can ask Sebastian right now.
I'm just, I'm not sure this is doable without all 4 of those.
Together?
Yeah. So I
No,
think you have to
we-
move them together.
Councillor Woodward moved number 1 to get this on the floor, so you want us to move the package?
Yeah, otherwise,
Yeah, okay, so
That's-
1 to 4.
That's fine, yes.
Okay, 1 to 4.
Yes.
Okay with the seconder? Yeah, okay. All right. Questions and comments? Councillor Page?
Okay, well, I'll start with, I would have left this to 3, but I am going to move to amend the third one to strike the no cost components of it. So I can bring out all that wording and you guys can figure it out, but basically strike the at no cost and strike the until that time that the association has paid off the debts incurred component. And obviously the wording changes, and the reason for that, I guess I need a seconder for the amendment for
Yes.
discussion.
So that's moved by the mover. That'll have to be a friendly amendment from the mover if you feel that
no, I think it's,
that would work
I think it would be a amendment to that.
to that particular one.
Yeah, and I'm just not clear on what are you replacing with anything or just striking
Nope.
it? Okay.
No, I would need a seconder. But essentially, yeah, thank you.
So you want to remove the piece at no cost for a term of 10 years with the possibility of renewal until such time as association has paid off its
A
debt.
little bit more precise in that it's the removal of at no cost. So it would read in the end that the City of Nelson agree in principle to lease the land to the Kootenai Association for a term of 10 years with a possibility of renewal in developing the Cube 2.0, subject to the city satisfying the legislative requirements.
Okay, so let's stop you there, and can you give us a bit of background as to why you would want that?
Sure.
Seconded. I'll
You want to second that?
for the amendment.
Yeah.
Okay,
So now that we're clear on the wording,
yeah,
I believe that we've had numerous discussions with PTEs, with leases that people were looking for relief that come from nonprofits, that we've constantly said that it is important to keep a fair and balanced approach to the tax burden, to the taxpayer, even when it comes to nonprofits, that there's a value there that these guys are aspiring for. And so I would advocate for us not walking into this and deciding that we are just going to give the land away and that we are not going to expect a lease that is fair and equitable compared to what we would expect a lease from all the other nonprofits that rent our facilities and engage with the city in that regard. So that's the piece I think I would say we remove. I think we should develop a lease agreement for this brand new facility, which will be quite a big lift, but they should cost in at the beginning the financials that they should pay for the land, just like anyone else would pay for the land. While they are a nonprofit, they're certainly not without means. We have the same expectation for all our other nonprofits. So,
Can I just clarify on that? We have a number of lease arrangements with nonprofits, the Capitol Theater, the Civic Society, Touchstones, all our Civic Center facilities. None of them have any lease payments with them. So I just want to clarify our policy is not that we charge fair market rent. What we do is charge for things like utilities and those type of things, but in many cases, we don't charge those nonprofits for the base lease amount. I think Touchstones was 25 years at $1. The Selkirk College campus as a whole is 25 plus years at $1. KSA was $1. Civic Center is $1. None of the tenants there pay any. This Capitol Theater is no charge for that either. So there's most of our facilities for cultural and recreation are not charged lease fees. So just to be clear, that's not our current
I think you're
standard.
kind of lumping that in with, as an example, Nelson Cares might be an example of what you're thinking about.
well, I think one of the pieces that's missing for me when handing out a benefit like this is we haven't had public consultation if this is a priority for the public to provide a benefit towards. We haven't had a feasibility study. We don't have a needs assessment. It's not coming out of long-term planning. It's not an existing component trying to develop. It's a nonprofit. They've been doing really well. They're expanding. They're going further. So for me, I'm not sure we've done our diligences to say that we should be handing out a $1 lease so that they can have a brand new home. So
So maybe you're better off just vote against the whole thing rather than trying to.
Nope. I'm just, my only hang-up is the lease being $1 or no cost.
Okay, but you brought up several things there, like no consultation and time to study, etc. Is that important to you as well?
I think when you're going to give a public benefit away, yeah.
Yeah, Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just argue that, not argue, but I would just state that, part of our job as a city is to grow organizations and help organizations grow in ways that we can. And it's, in the arts and culture, it can be really challenging to pay market prices. I think, as the city manager said, we do support all kinds of arts and culture for that reason, and that we have quite a rich arts and culture, and part of that as a city works in these ways of offering $1 leases for a year to organizations. So I would just say that it's like we're helping plant a seed to grow this, which will then be a great benefit to our town and our community. So I think it's one of the ways that we can help out.
Thank you, Councillor Woodward. Just a reminder to Council, we're speaking to the amendment here, not the
Yep, that's.
as a whole. So any further questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favor of the amendment? Fails. Okay. Any any questions of Sebastian at this point in time? None? Okay. So we have in front of us recommendation. The council passed the following resolution. The council approved the location at 820 10th Street. And the number for the property is PID 012041688 as a location for the Cube 20 climbing facility as proposed by the Kootenai Climbing Association. And that the details in regards to the Kootenai climbing use at 820 10th Street site as a location for the Cube, including but not limited to the exact parcel location, parcel dimensions and site assessed, be finalized by staff and documented in the license agreement in advance of any site work. And number 3, do you want to read out number 3 now?
Sure.
Gabriel?
As modified, as discussed at the, outside of the discussion, it would read that the city agrees in principle to lease the land to the Kootenai Climbing Association at no cost for a term of 10 years with the possibility of a renewal until that time that the association has paid off any debts incurred in developing Q 2.0, subject to the city satisfying all the requirements of the community charter with regards to notice.
Thank you. And finally, that the city agrees to provide Kootenai Climbing Association when required with a letter of support for the purpose of a grant application related to Cube 2.0. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Recorded, Councillor Page opposed. Thank you. Next up is the parking bylaw amendment. Okay, considering that with the city's downtown parking strategy, staff has prepared off-street parking and landscape amendment bylaw number 3553, the traffic amendment bylaw number 3554, council is now requested to adopt the 2 amended bylaws. Now, hopefully everybody's had a chance to go through this, but it does have meaning. Mover, Councillor Renwick, and second by Councillor Charwood. Questions or comments from council at this point? If you have any questions of Sebastian? Everybody's clear as mud here? Okay. On that note, Sebastian, I just made a little note on this actually myself, thinking now that we're sort of kind of rolling out of COVID. Are we going to be looking at patio allocations, alignments, et cetera, going forward? Would that come under this? Because it does impact parking, right?
Yep. No, it would come under another bylaw, which is the sidewalk cafe bylaw. But we are, we are transitioning back to the pre-COVID bylaw in terms of the amount of space that they can occupy. This summer they had one last go at an extra parking space, but most of the businesses aren't taking it. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So the recommendation is that the off-street parking and landscape amendment number 3553, 2022 be finally adopted. All in favor? Carried. And secondly, that the traffic amendment bylaw number 3554,
Move.
Second.
Councillor Morrison and Councillor Page, all in favor? Thank you. Onward and upward. Road closure. Okay. Vernon Street road closure, we dealt with this at our last public meeting, so I don't need to give you much of a preamble on it. But there is a staff recommendation.
I'll move.
Moved by Councillor Woodward, second by Councillor Renwick, that the Vernon Street road closure number 3552, 2022 be finally adopted. All in favor? Thank you very much. Next one is notice of title at 754 Highway 3A and 758 Highway 3A in Nelson to register a notice on title on 2 separate properties as consequences of a building bylaw contravention. And there's a staff report or staff, is there staff here to speak to this if there's a need?
Mayor, just so you know that one of the property owners is here and would like to speak, and also Bruce McNeil, the city building inspector, is available on
so-
WebEx. I don't know if you want to start with the property owner and then have staff respond. Up to you.
They do have the right to.
And we do have our fire chief here as well, if we need to call on him as well. Okay. Okay, so the owner's here. If you wish to speak, you're more than welcome to come up to the microphone and say your piece. And
This microphone.
yes, absolutely, yeah.
Is it okay if I sit?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, just give us your name and
I got a couple broken ribs.
Oh, mountain biking accident. Listen to that.
Time of
You're
year.
in good company.
yeah. So, just so you know, just give us your name and I think we have your address here, but just to be safe. And you have 10 minutes to present to council. Council's willing to hear your comments, but it's up to you to give us your presentation.
The property owner has requested that I provide the slide, and so I can put
Okay.
the slide up at his request.
Okay.
Thanks. And my name is Andrew. I have security reasons that I can't give my full name for this meeting. But if you guys are happy, I'll proceed
Yeah, go
with
ahead.
the information. So first of all, thanks councilors and staff and the mayor for taking time to hear me out on this. This has been an ongoing issue for quite some time, and I'm hoping to seek some sort of resolution here. My neighbor is unable to attend today, so he has sent me an email for me to read on his behalf with his concerns. So I'm going to start with an introduction. Our properties are beside each other, so there's some commonalities there, but I'm just gonna, I apologize if I bore you with the details, but I went on the website and there was 37 pages of emails and documents that I'm gonna try my best to summarize in my 10 minutes and my neighbor's 10 minutes, and then hopefully have time to answer any questions at the end of it. So, the wording cites on this recommendation for a notice on title that there is a contravention of a building bylaw. That's what this is all about. The city of Nelson doesn't have a bylaw that dictates fire access requirements related to this type of property. It also doesn't have a bylaw that mandates sprinkler installation. Section 9 of the building code doesn't specify a required road access width or any other necessary characteristics for fire access. Fire access requirements are up to the discretion of the fire chief and hinges on his or her willingness to seek a reasonable resolution to emergency access. So that's my sort of preamble. I'll give you the background on how I arrived here today. So in 2017, my wife and I bought the property in question at 746 Highway 3A with another young couple. And our plan was to subdivide this. It's a 2-acre parcel. It's just across the Orange Bridge. Plan was to subdivide it into 4 lots, sell the existing house and cabin to recoup our subdivision costs and subsequently build on the adjacent lots. This was a massive undertaking. We had all sorts of engineers involved. We performed a sewer extension for the city as well as a subsequent extension to the North Shore water utility. Through this process, we needed approval from the fire chief to come and recommend access in order for the subdivision to get approved. So the then fire chief came and had a look, and his recommendation was, you can see the road here. It's kind of marked up and it's hard to see, but that was the road extension that we put in. But his recommendation was a 6-meter wide access road with a hammerhead turnaround. So we looked at it and we couldn't put a 6-meter wide road in. We'd have to bulldoze that house. And so he said, if you can do it at 4.5 meters and build your house with sprinklers, then we can make it work. At this time, amongst a million other things we were trying to sort out, we were trying to figure out our water because Nelson's water doesn't go across the bridge. So we had a well on the original property. We were trying to see if we could use a communal well. We had applications for water licenses out of Kootenai Lake. And eventually we ended up tying in with the North Shore water utility, which was this is a pivotal piece of my story here. Because with this water line extension, we were then mandated to add 3 fire hydrants. We basically extended the water line from main jet all the way to our property and had to put in 3 fire hydrants at $8,000 a piece. So it was $24,000 that we spent that we hadn't initially thought about. I mean, this is what happens when you do subdivisions. We got everything, we checked all the boxes on the subdivision, and we got our final approval, and then moved to design and build our houses. I'll admit right away, when I submitted my building plans, I didn't put any information in about sprinklers. I am not a contractor. I'm an owner builder. I had naively thought, we now have 3 fire hydrants in front of our house. Why would we need sprinklers? To provide context, my wife and I both work full-time. We have 2 school-age kids. We just sold our farm. We moved into a 1-bedroom apartment with our dog and cat while we were building. I work as a public servant in the Forest Service. I'm gone all summer. I had a million balls in the air. So again, we put in our permit. There was no ask for engineered drawings of sprinklers or anything. And we progressed with the build. And we had the building inspector come by multiple times, as they do. And not once was there a mention of any deficiency throughout our build. There was other deficiencies. There was extra engineering that we had to do to the foundation. We had to put in screw piles. We put in 100 yards of concrete. We removed 170 truckloads of dirt. It was a massive undertaking. And so, to be honest, this whole sprinkler issue wasn't an issue to me. On February 6, 2020, I received my occupancy permit, and we moved into our house. Our family moved in. The following year, we had our final inspection completed and signed off on our laneway house. There was no mention of a deficiency pertaining to any sprinklers on my final sign-off or my occupancy. And again, I'm an owner builder who's juggling a million balls, and I was hoping if there was a deficiency, we would know along the way, not wait until my house has been finished and we've moved in. And so now I look back and I realize that likely the inspector had no knowledge of any sprinkler requirement, as this isn't a bylaw or a building code requirement. As far as I knew, the only issue I had to address was a minor deficiency in my deck railings. Otherwise, I thought we were safe and we were good to go. So post-build, fast forward to March of last year, the neighbors who we had finished the subdivision with had sold their lot to my now new neighbor, who came in and bought the lot. I'll read his piece later, but he basically started sniffing around for his building permit, and the city requested engineered drawings with sprinklers in order for his plan to be approved. So he, right away, because we were neighbors and chatting about builds, he said, well, did you build with sprinklers? And I said, well, no, I didn't. We put in these fire hydrants and I got my occupancy and final, like, I think we're good. Well, then I received an email from a city employee citing my lack of sprinklers, saying I would need to remediate the issue right away, put sprinklers in, or have a notice on my title saying my house was unsafe. So I was completely taken aback. And again, wondered why nobody let me know along the way that this was a deficiency, and waited until our houses were complete, and I didn't really get an answer. So then further next spring, the retired fire chief then showed up and met with my neighbor and I, and kind of said what had happened, and I explained what had happened, and we started talking about potential solutions. So the distance from my front door of my house to Highway 3A is 40 meters. I asked the fire chief if every new build in Nelson had a 6-meter wide driveway, so any of the laneway houses or anything, and he said no. So I said, well then do they require sprinklers? And he said no. And I'm paraphrasing, but he said as long as we can park a fire truck on a main road within 45 meters of the front door, we won't require sprinklers. And so my neighbor and I looked at each other and the fire chief and grabbed a tape out of his truck and measured, and it was 40 meters to the highway from my front door, which is within the 45-meter threshold he had referenced. To me, this was a great solution to get this sped along and get my final signed off. Last summer, during a super busy fire season, I get a notice or letter saying they're putting a notice on my title, and I can't make a meeting because I'm off doing what I do. So my neighbor was able to meet with some staff from the city as well as the chief and sit down and have this conversation. And in the meantime, the neighbor had approached Highways and said, is there any issue with the fire department accessing or parking on the highway? And they said, well, no, of course not. And he went as far as to ask if we could construct steps to make it easier in the case that for some reason the fire truck couldn't go down our access road. So despite this info, the chief, and I wasn't at this meeting, I spoke with Sebastian about it afterwards. The chief said, if you can widen it to 5.5 meters, then that would work. And so we decided that that's what we would do. We would widen this road by 1 meter. As you can see by the drawings there, it's going to be really tricky to do. So we had until July 31st of this year to finish this job. We weren't able to secure the engineering after the winter. There's nobody available. I talked to 2 contractors who said this is going to be a $40,000 job. You're going to have to excavate right down beside that house and cut off a section of roof and re-engineer that whole road in order to make this happen. So first of all, the house in question is going to get demolished within 2 years, and I have an email from the new owner of that property stating that, and he is going to widen the road because he wants to be able to get his vehicles in and out. That's Highway 3A. Do you have the second photo, Gabe? So you can see how close we are to the highway. That highway is cleared. It's probably one of the first roads to be cleared in town. And our driveway is cleared at 8 a.m. every morning. There's a sixplex at the end, and people need to get to school and get to work. So to me, this is it's got some of the best accesses of any property in Nelson. The other issue I have, and I don't want to say an issue, but I'm trying to paint a picture that we didn't cut corners on this build. Our entire house is built beyond Fire Smart BC standards. It's all fire resilient, exterior cladding, closed soffits, roofs, composite decks. It's bounded by a lake, deciduous trees, and the highway. And so we built it in to be as safe as we could. So collectively, I just want to resolve this issue and be in compliance and signed off. We can have this signed off by the end of the month. I have a solution. I've talked to Bruce McNeil about how to remedy my railings, but I want to get this out of the way before we can do that. So my question is, how does putting a notice on title address the concerns of the access and egress here? I just want to get this done. I don't see any building code or City of Nelson bylaw contravention. We're still prepared to build steps from the highway if it helps the comfort level of the new fire chief. We can also provide some kind of pedestrian guard if they feel that, that section's not wide enough. Could you go back one more time, please, before I move on? So you can see that blue line, that's 2.5 meters. That's somewhere in the ballpark of the widest fire truck. So there's 1 meter on each side. My brother has a house on Houston. He lives in a laneway, and I couldn't drive to his house 4 weeks after the snowstorm this year. And again, this is cleared at 8 a.m. every day. So my point is, if for some reason a fire truck can't make it in and out of there or park there, then let's use the highway as an option. And so, yeah, anyway, that's my side of things. I'm gonna, if you just give me a second, the font's kind of small here. I'm gonna read from my neighbor's piece. The subdivision was fully completed by others prior to my purchase of an empty city lot in the summer of 2020. I was not privy to any internal emails related to the subdivision or any agreements made with regards to the width of roadway or installation of sprinklers. Prior to my purchase, I carefully investigated all aspects of this property, including a review of a very carefully written fire access easement. This easement clearly defined access requirements, including fire truck turnaround, ongoing maintenance, snow clearing, and other items to ensure safe access was provided in case of an emergency. I also confirmed the subdivision was accepted as complete by the city with no outstanding deficiencies. As-built engineering drawings showing a 4.5 meter roadway were reviewed and appeared to be accurate to site conditions found. There was no mention of a formal sprinkler requirement, agreement, or a roadway deficiency on title when I bought the property. Upon applying for a permit, I was told I would need to install sprinklers or widen the road to 6 meters. I retained a mechanical engineer and started to evaluate all options. It was ultimately decided a mutual collaborative approach with the adjacent owners of 754 Highway 3A was the best way to move forward. After much review and discussion, we determined it was possible to proceed with widening the road to 5.5 meters. Unfortunately, due to many factors, we were not able to complete this work prior to July 30th. Which I addressed in my piece. He's got a bunch of bullets here. The bottom line is one, there is no formal requirement for a 6 meter or 5.5 meter access road in Part 9 of the BC Building Code. Part 3 is not applicable to my permit or this construction. The City of Nelson does not have a formal bylaw that dictates road access shall be 6 meters wide for all newly constructed properties. There are no access requirements or guidelines posted on the city's website. The city has issued many recent building permits that have far worse access with no enforcement of a 6 meter wide width, as I have reviewed many similar permits that back onto Crown land and are in much more inaccessible areas. If there was a requirement to exceed building codes at subdivision by forcing fire sprinkler installation, the City of Nelson should have been fully transparent and included this detail on title as part of the fire protection easement or otherwise. If the city wishes to require unusual access requirements that are above and beyond what the BC Building Code requires, there should be a formal bylaw in place with all the information available to the public. The requirements should be applied consistently and transparently across all developments and new construction. The existing roadway was designed and engineered for fire access and approved by the City of Nelson as such. There are some incorrect facts and measurements noted in the letter from the former fire chief dated September 9th, 2021, and I'm happy to discuss these at greater length, which he obviously can't because he's not here. The property at 753A will be redeveloped. This is the house that I'm talking about. Will be redeveloped within 2 years, at which point the road will be widened. It does not make financial or logistical sense to complete works now that will need to be removed in 24 months to accommodate for a new build. There are multiple solutions that provide safe access and are code compliant without being excessive. In closing, I am fully committed to collaboratively working with the city to ensure there is safe and effective fire access to 758 Highway 3A. Adding a notice on title at this point will do nothing to further the process towards an acceptable resolution. I respectfully request that the notice on title is not placed. I invite council and any city staff to come visit the property, take a look for yourself, and discuss collaboratively with myself and my adjacent neighbor to find a reasonable and fair solution. And end of report.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. So, to that note, Sebastian, did you have any response or to the fire chief at this point?
I think we'll just answer questions. So Bruce, the building official, is online.
Yeah.
And the fire chief is also in the room. They probably have more of the technical expertise, but I can intervene as required.
Yeah, Sebastian, I think it's worthwhile for our fire chief to respond. You know, I was part of a meeting with the other property owner. There was an agreement that was made in place in good faith, collaboratively, and we seem to have gone all the way back to the beginning again, so I'm confused why we're actually at this place. I think the as was discussed at that meeting, it's not just the width of the fire truck. People have to get in and out of that fire truck. Doors are open. There's gear on those trucks. It's not, they need working room to be able to respond to an emergency or a fire. It's not about the truck. It's about the people working on that. And it's not safe to be doing that work on the highway, on the very busy highway, and the disruption that you're going to cause to many, many people. And I thought we had come up with a good solution. So I'm not quite sure what the ask is. The notice on title does protect the city from liability in the event there is a fire or someone is injured at that property, that it wasn't the city of Nelson, it was the property owners that didn't move forward with the agreed upon solution. So I don't know if council wants to hear more. I'm not the technical expert. All I know, I did attend this meeting. It was to find a good solution to this. We all walked away in good faith. My understanding is that was communicated to yourself as the other property owner. So we have been working with the property owners, trying to find the best solution. We're not looking to pass unnecessarily costs on to property owners. That's not in our interest, but we do need to make sure our employees are safe, that your properties are safe. You've said clearly you spent a significant amount of money on developing these properties, and we want to be able to respond in the right way and make sure we can protect your properties. So I don't know if you want to be clear on the ask. I don't know if the ask is, I'm just not clear on what the ask is.
Well,
the ask to wait 2 years till?
Well, no, like I say, I don't feel like I'm being heard.
Well, I haven't been in a
There's a
meeting with
YouTube
you.
video of fire trucks parked on the highway putting out Kootenai sleds and wheels.
Yeah.
As a wildland fire person, I can close a highway in any direction at any time.
we
We closed the
recognize that.
highway for our extension of the water line and the sewer line. I understand there's concerns about getting around doors. I was not at that meeting and I wasn't able to present my case, and that's why I'm hoping to do it now. I'm saying this house is going to be demolished within 2 years. You can park on the highway. If for some reason you can't get a 2.5 meter truck down a 4.5 meter wide road with doors open and closed, we're willing to build stairs and we have approval from highways. So those are moot points.
Okay, so maybe we should have our fire staff, because they're the professional structural fire people.
And for the record, this is what I wanted to do before this meeting, but I didn't get any response back from the fire chief. I didn't want it to
My
come to
understanding
this.
is the fire chief did meet with you, so maybe we can have our fire chief.
Yeah, so I think that's important that we hear from our fire chief. And maybe, Len, I don't know if you want to accompany the new chief or not, because you're involved from day one, but whoever wants to take the lead on this, you're more than welcome to come up, and we'll ask you to exit your chair for now.
Yeah,
and
thanks for your time, Council. I
problem,
do
thank you.
appreciate it. I know it's a bit of a mouthful.
I'll speak to some points.
Yeah, you have to come to the,
Sorry,
yeah,
Mayor.
because we need the sound system working, chief.
I'll speak to some stuff.
Yeah,
Okay.
just have a seat.
I sit.
Yeah.
And then I'll probably let the retired chief speak to some stuff because he was involved in some of the original decisions. As far as parking on the highway, Nelson has what's classified as an STSS. It's a Superior Tanker Shell Service Program, and in order to fight fires in areas where there isn't a certified hydrant system, which there are 3 new hydrants erected along the highway, but they're not tied into a certified water system that can actually supply the volume of water that those hydrants are capable of discharging. The city has been put on notice many years ago, and I don't have a document to support this, but that if City of Nelson was to tie into the North Shore Water Utility and damage the infrastructure by collapsing the mains, that we'd be responsible for paying for the repair of the mains. Now that Aqua Diversities has taken over that water system, they do have a long-term plan at upgrading it, but it's a long-term plan. I don't think that there's anything. So when they put those hydrants in, we approached them because we were curious, because we didn't know that they were being put in, and we asked if they were certified fire hydrants, and they said no. then we said, you need to flag these as not certified. So now if you take a look at those 3 hydrants, they actually have placards on them that say, these are not hydrants. These are basically water test ports. So unfortunately, the hydrants that were installed is for a much longer plan than the development is for. So given that in consideration, the insurance companies have been really looking at hydrants and their buildings' proximity to hydrants. And so the insurance rates on the North Shore increased significantly. In 2014, we applied for and put together the STSS and were successful. And that allows us to supply X amount of gallons per minute for the fire underwriters. So it's a test that I'm getting into too much detail here. It's a test that we can prove that we can supply water for firefighting purposes, but it's via water tenders and portable ponds. We can't set that up on the highway. It takes up way too much space to set that up. That would completely shut down traffic on Highway 3A. And everybody knows how busy Highway 3A is for hours and hours while we were to fight a structure fire. That is not sound firefighting operational tactics, is to set up on that major thoroughfare. Did we set up on that thoroughfare for Kootenay Sleds and Wheels? Yeah, we did. There is a 3-lane at there because of Johnson Road, so we were able to keep 1 lane of traffic open. We did not have the STSS back there. We actually had to run a 4-inch line out of the lake. And the explosions from Kootenay Sleds and Wheels because of the motorcycles and the gas cans and propane cylinders and all that sort of stuff is why we parked on the highway, because it was just wasn't safe enough to fight from the parking lot until later on, and then we started to downscale our operation and we moved into the parking lot. That's a little bit of history there. As far as part 9 not speaking towards fire department access to buildings, 9.10.20.3 is fire department access to buildings. And in that, I don't know if you want me to read all this, it refers to note 9.10.20.31 and a section under part 3. So part 9 references part 3. So therefore, you have to kind of break down the code, and it says, okay, so this is under part 9, where access to building is required, provided by means of a roadway or yard. The design and location of such roadway or yard shall take into account connection with public thoroughfare, weight of firefighting apparatus, roadway width, radius of curves, overhead clearance, location of fire hydrants, location of fire department connections, and vehicle parking. So, we got to take all that sort of stuff in consideration. So that's under part 9. So that's residential buildings that we're talking about here. So it's apples to apples. And then the alternate solution that is in here that's listed as A for alternate solution 9, 10, 23, and 1. You guys got time for this?
Yep.
Okay. In addition to other considerations taken into account in the planning of fire department access routes, special variations could be permitted for a house or a residential building that is protected with an automatic sprinkler system. The sprinkler system must be designed in accordance with appropriate NFPA standard, and there must be assurance that water supply pressure and quantity are unlikely to fail. These considerations could apply to buildings that are located on sides of hills, where this one is, and are not conveniently accessible by roads designed for firefighting equipment. And also to infill housing units that are located behind other buildings on a given property. So, the concession was made that if you sprinklered your building, you could get a 4.5 meter, plus each of these houses have a laneway house. So that would be infill housing units that are located behind other buildings or given property. So that was taken into consideration when the requirements for the sprinkler system was put in. The sprinkler systems weren't put in, so then the only thing we have to go back on is an acceptable roadway width. Okay. Then the part that references part 3 of the building code is the design and construction. So that, I want to make this clear. This is part 9 referencing part 3, so it's applicable. The design and construction of fire department access routes involves the consideration of many variables, some of which are specified in the requirements in the code. All the variables should be considered in relation to the type, size, type and size of fire department vehicles available in the municipality or areas where the building will be constructed. It is appropriate, therefore, that the local fire department be consulted prior to the design and construction of road access. So, this was taken to the BC Building Code Appeal Board, the decision of the retired Fire Chief Len McCharles, and was upheld. I have the decision here. I think that if there is a plan to demolish the house, then the notice on title can be removed when that work is done. But in order to protect the city, I don't know if you guys have ever responded to fire, but I've responded to a few. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, when it's pitch black, and you and the person that you worked with all night are driving code 3 across town to the furthest house that we protect that has no hydrants, and our next coming in truck is going to be 10 to 15 minutes away, we shouldn't be concerned about road width, especially if it's wintertime. This road parallels, Gabe, can you bring up that second photo, please? This road parallels the highway, and it's very feasible that any off-cast from plowing that highway could potentially land on the roadway below. Plus, I know everybody knows we just had a massive snow year. I mean, if to Andrew's point, in order to widen that road, they would have to dig up alongside the house because the engineer knows it won't take the weight of a fire truck. So, you know, if we were to slide off the road, I mean, that's a 2 to 3 feet drop in some of those spots. Replacement value of a fire truck is $1 million. We don't have that many of them, so we can't take the risk of accessing properties that don't have sufficient roadway widths. It's just sorry.
Thank you. We have 2 questions, one from Councillor Woodward and one from Councillor Page.
Thank you, Mayor. So, the one thing that just keeps looping around in my head is if things stayed as is and there was a fire there, and let's say a couple of buildings burnt down there, you know, where's the liability lay? And I think that's
The liabilities with the city and the fire department, because, I mean, those are houses we should have been able to action, but for unforeseen circumstances, we weren't able to access.
So then I just think, well, you know, what would the owners do then? I mean, would there be suing involved? Would there be, I mean, I just feel like we're at this crux point where these are brand new homes that are just built. They need to be protected, and it's quite tight there. There are a lot of homes there.
Yes.
And I just feel like it seems pretty precarious at this point. Could the fire department actually attack that fire? And without putting what you're saying, without putting the fire crew or the truck in great risks. So I just keep thinking of like this crux point of the safety of the fire crew and the equipment and the safety of the homes and the citizens, and it doesn't feel like it's matching up here at all. So I just want to say I hear both sides, but at the end of the day, if a fire happens there, it really sounds like you couldn't actually fight it well, and it would be quite dangerous.
We would have to stage the fire truck much further back, which would then it would slow down operations to the point that, you know, I mean, we would have to extend, like our pumping pressures are way off. You know, we're gonna have to run, in order to get to a laneway house, we're gonna have to run 300 feet of hose. I mean, we don't have 400 feet of.
There's a lot of risk there right now, as we speak, for fighting fire, especially in the wildfire season too.
Yeah, getting the truck close to those premises is, I mean, on a beautiful sunny day in August, yeah, I can get the fire truck in there. You know, am I concerned that roadway might give out and collapse into the house? Yeah. If that wasn't a concern, could in a sunny day in August, could I get there? Sure. 2 o'clock in the morning, February 23rd, just after a fresh snowfall, I don't know if I want to take the fire truck in there.
Thank you.
So it has to be an access for all year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Councillor Page.
Thank you. I am going to move the first motion for the notice on title, and I'm going to amend it. So I'm going to add an and further that the fees associated with the removal of the notice on title and the renewal of the building permit be waived in the future when that needs to happen.
Councillor Page, I'm not sure the first motion is removed, so.
I'm moving it.
Moving it.
I'm moving it with that additional and further. That any fees to remove it also be waived.
And just so all council understands, the fee to remove notice on title is $500.
Yeah. So I think it's a point of pride. I think it's a point of pride.
But Gabe, is that the total?
Total.
Yeah. and
Each house would get it, so it'd be a grand
Well,
total.
we're just doing one.
Oh, which is right, yeah.
I would do the same thing for the next one, and I'll speak to it.
So, Councillor Page, I believe you need a seconder for your motion.
Yeah, if someone would be so kind.
Councillor Morrison, and the Corporation of the City of Nelson be directed to file a notice of Land Title Survey Authority of British Columbia stating that a resolution has been made in accordance with Section 57 of the Community Charter by the City of Nelson relating to land at 754 Highway 3A Nelson, legally described as Lot C, District Lot 372, Kootenai District Plan, EPP 92722, PID 030876656, and further that the information respecting the resolution may be inspected at the office of the City of Nelson on a normal working days during the regular office hours, and that the fee to remove the notice of motion be waived.
Yeah, and renew the building permit.
Pardon me?
And whatever the renewal, there's a renewal fee for the building permit of 150. So whatever fees associated with it. Whatever fees to remove it,
Okay.
that would
Fees-
be associated.
Fees attached to removing the notice of motion.
And Mayor, if I may, just one other point so that all council understands as well, the fee associated with the removal on notice on title is per our fees and charges bylaw, but it is to cover the expense because it is a registration with the land titles office. So it is not something that we do without expense.
We still have to pay it.
Yep.
So he needs a seconder.
Okay, seconder. Councillor Morrison, second.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And just not to have debate, that is something a council could do if they move forward in a expedited manner to do this. You remove that now and nothing happens for 4, 5, 10 years. You're going to keep waiving those fees. I would suggest a better policy would be if they perform, then a council could consider it at the time of performance as opposed to incenting before they actually have moved forward with something.
Okay, speaker.
I'll speak.
Oh, go ahead.
As the mover.
And then Councillor Renwick. And then Councillor Lochner.
It's a great point. I'm comfortable with leaving that small amount of ambiguity. I've heard from the proponent. I have heard from the other owner as well. I've heard from the chief. Obviously, there's a prerogative here for doing the actual firefighting within our community to understand what these requirements are, what these work requirements are actually going to be. Going through the 37 pages of documents for communication, it is very clear that commitments were made on a number of occasions to address the concerns. And I appreciate the difficulty in this trade environment of bringing this up to compliance. But what I also heard within the conversation argument for not taking this action was from the other, was the lived experience of the other owner, not having this kind of warning sitting on the title going into it. And so should any of these units move or change hand ownership, this notice of title does seem to be required just to mitigate and be transparent with anyone going into the future. And so for the nominal fees that are associated with that, not that the work itself will be nominal, but I think we can look at waiving those into the future. So I think at the end of the day, this is why we've deployed this tool in the first place. It is to have that transparency in this very busy real estate market that these concerns need to be addressed. It is certainly up to our chief who's going to have to deploy on those situations to understand what's going on as we elevate the situation for much of the built environment. So it is more effective and productive to fight these fires when they do come. So that's all I have to say on it. I've read it all, heard it all.
Thank you.
It should happen.
Councillor Renwick and then Councillor Lockenberg.
Thank you. This is a question for probably CAO Cormac. 2 years is a long time if that's what it would take to repair the road or bring the road up to standards. Is there a solution that can happen quicker than that?
Defer to the professional. The solution that came up was to widen the road because it was felt that sprinklers, it was impractical to add sprinklers. I can say that the second home builder clearly knew that he may not have done his proper research at the time of purchase, but at the time of building permit, he had committed to sprinkling that building and just didn't.
So the solution is to widen the road, period, but the problem is it's 2 years
Yeah.
from now.
So I don't know if there's
At the end of the day, that's the
I haven't seen any engineered drawings or plan or anything outlining any possible complications to widening the road, so I can't speak to the challenges other than the financial ones.
We did meet with the contractor at the time. They seemed to think it was reasonably easy to do that, but I'm sure once the engineer got involved, it probably doesn't get quite as simple,
Right.
unfortunately.
Well, we do have, and I know there's a lot of communication, but the reason why we want to include all that is that there's been a lot of work and a lot of back and forth and a lot of trying to find a path forward. And if you went through all the emails, I know it could be a bit tricky to figure out the dates and timelines, but some of the most recent communications was with owner number 2 wanting a conditional occupancy. And we gave them a conditional occupancy based on communication from a contractor saying that, yes, we've retained an engineer, yes, we're going to do this work. We'll have it done by the end of the construction season. And since then, we haven't had any communications that was actually going to happen. So since they've received their conditional occupancy, often the building officials do not like to give conditional occupancies for these reasons. It's sometimes once you're in, it's sometimes difficult to get everything sorted out and cleaned up. But sometimes it's tricky, and we want to work with people and we want to get them in their home as soon as possible. We know it's a tricky and stressful and expensive time. That being said, all those commitments were there, and the last communications we've got were that, yes, we're talking to SNT Engineering, we're talking to, we've got Case Contracting, we're going to get this work done. So I don't think there's necessarily something to Fire Chief's point. We haven't received anything saying that it was impossible to widen the road.
So I think the key piece here is the risk to the corporation of the City of Nelson. That's the key. And that's why this notice of title would go on. It would be protect the municipality. It doesn't mean that road's going to be widened tomorrow morning. No. Because it isn't. It probably is at some point in time, but in the meantime, at least we're protected. And if a fire did take place out there, you'd probably go and fight it, would you? Yeah. So they'd have to figure out a safe way to manage that fire. But having said that, there's 4 units down below that road that would need to be protected, and that's not an easy thing to do. And if we were to allow this project to continue as is, without this notice of motion on it, we would be liable for any of the risks that happen on that site. So we need to keep that in mind. That's what we're responsible for here tonight, protecting the well-being of the corporation of the City of Nelson. Okay, Councillor Lockenberg. Oh, sorry, you had a supplemental.
Well, yes, if you don't mind, thank you, Mayor. And I guess it's another question for staff, but after reading all the information provided, there seems to be a bit of a disconnect between the fire hall and corporate services. Did we drop the ball on this with the inspection? Is that, I know, I mean, we make mistakes, but is that what happened?
Well, Sebastian spoke to the second occupancy. I'm not sure on the first occupancy of, I don't know if you want to comment on that.
We could defer to Bruce if he's still online, on that one.
Yeah, hi there. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, the first project, the notices were given for the principal dwelling on the property that got constructed first. And we didn't give final occupancy for that building because of the lack of sprinklers, road widening, and non-compliant guards on the decks. And then over a time frame of a couple of more years, probably more like a year and a half, the laneway house got built. And over that time, it didn't come up in conversation much about the road widening issue. And I did, in fact, final the laneway house with just as a regular everyday duty in a normal circumstance without thinking back a year and a half about the condition on the other property of the other building on the same property. So it should have been also a conditional occupancy or just a non-final, but it doesn't really affect much because the final was never given on the principal dwelling on the lot. So it was holding all the deficiencies based on the road widening and the sprinklers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Councillor Loughlin.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a few questions and a comment. First question for staff is, did that road has always been that wide, and there's previously been dwellings on that property, so there was an issue prior to these new buildings for fire access.
That's a new road.
Oh, it's a new road.
Yeah, so that area was a much larger piece. It stopped actually before this house. And if you were actually to spin the camera around sorry, the photo I'm looking at, but you can't see it.
You can see like a little tiny version.
We can see it on your screen.
You see it on my screen? If you're spinning the camera around, there's actually a really big parking lot right there.
Yeah.
So it's like almost 3 times as wide. People have their trailers backed in, all sorts of stuff. That's where the road ended.
Okay.
And then when this property was subdivided off and created those other lots, they were required to put this access road in, but it's not sufficient.
But not sufficient. Okay. So thank you for that. So the second question, I guess, is for the for staff or for the proponent. The notice on title, the conditional occupancy. First, they're occupying their home. They're moved in, and on the second unit, have they started construction or so construction?
It's all done.
It's all done.
Yeah,
And everybody's occupying.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about here with the notice on title is in the condition that it's sold in the future. There's no additional financing that's needed, nothing. So I'm trying to understand what's the material impact of a notice on title other than protecting the corporation, and 2, just sort of creating a prod to get this work done eventually. Like, is there any other material?
A future buyer. You heard
Yeah,
from-
yeah.
You heard from the other proponent, there should have been a notice on title, and now they're saying,
There should have exactly.
why are you putting a notice on title?
Yeah, so I guess I'm trying to understand what's the main issue with the notice of title. It sounded like Councillor Page, through the chair, intimated that it was a matter of pride, and I get that, that's a valid reason, but it's not going to materially affect any of the residents. Is that true? Like, everybody's occupied, nobody's going to get kicked out?
That's correct. Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about, my understanding is it is a notice on title, so any future buyers I'm not sure if future lenders look at that information or not. Future
Okay.
buyers look at the property and see that it doesn't meet, the access route doesn't meet the requirements, and what else, what other else it says.
Okay, so
Insurance may be in.
insurance may be impacted. Okay. Okay, so that's helpful. So thank you for that. The third thing is, and I understand that the motion on the table right now includes a waiving of the fee to remove notice on title, and I'm okay with that. I understand that these are complicated. It was a challenging time, both with COVID and staff, that I would be fine with that. It seems to me that sometimes we have to make compromises for life, and the challenges of life. So I would be fine with the motion as presented. But I do think, to the mayor's point, that it's important that we maintain this notice on title. It's a fundamental responsibility as a council to protect the corporation. And this, as I understand it, does provide that protection in case of an issue that we would otherwise be liable for. So if I'm understanding all of those facts, if I didn't get anything wrong there, then I'm good and I'd be ready to vote.
Sorry,
Anybody else that hasn't spoke so far wants to speak? Hearing none, Councillor Page.
Not going to drastically change my position, but I do want to seek a bit of clarification on our interdepartmental action lists that go on between the fire department and development services, and what kind of mitigation or what kind of adjustments to our process are we making to make sure that in the future, when the fire chief
Councillor Page, I just want to stop you there. I know personally that these folks all met on a number of occasions. Each department, every one of them, Hydro, Public Works, including with the proponents. So there's no gap at our end of communication. And the ex-fire chief or retired fire chief can come and attest to that. In fact, one of the neighbors that owns one of these properties contacted me directly and asked me to if there was anything I could do about this, and I said absolutely not. I said, but I'm more than happy to facilitate to have a meeting with the staff, which was had, and it was one of a number that were had prior to that and since.
So as you heard from the building inspector,
May I finish my question?
Well, if your question is that these
Was
folks
there-
weren't speaking to each other,
It's not a statement, it's a question.
okay, what,
okay.
So what are we doing from a process standpoint that when these decisions are made, they're getting put somewhere in development services tied to the property so that this carries through as people are touching the file?
Maybe I may provide some context to this. I don't think there's anything that needs to change. If in the report, there's some communication since 2017 at time of subdivision that identified the requirements of either a 6-meter wide road or a sprinkler. That was identified from the get-go in 2017 and was identified during various permitting. We do referral processes for every development. It goes through each department. If we feel that a department hasn't commented and they need to, we reach out. But on the fire access point of view, we're solid. I've got a few more subdivisions ongoing right now that have the exact same condition because they're using private access roads that are going through properties, and it's either sprinkler or 6 meters, and that's what we need. So, given this file, I don't think there's anything where that was any communication that was missed between the fire department and development services in any of the approvals.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Councillor Woodward.
Just for my own clarification, this is quite complicated.
Yeah.
A lot of pieces here, but for my own clarification, what we're talking about is just securing that the city is not liable in case a fire happens there. This is saying, we've been through the process, these are the deficiencies. If we can't fight the fire because of these deficiencies, we noted that, and that's part of this process. And so that we can't be sued for not being able to access the property. Is that what we're,
well, I would say a couple things. One, people can obviously sue us, We're trying to limit that liability. You never know what happens in a court. This is the one tool we do have. It's the only tool we have. So we're asking council to at least put in place the tool that we do have to limit that risk. But we can't guarantee that someone wouldn't sue us. We can't guarantee that the courts would find in our favor. But this is the only tool we have to hopefully get this work done. And the end game is to make this a safe property to be able to protect. That's our end game.
Okay, thank you.
And this would apply to if the railing wasn't put up on the deck, as an example.
For sure. I just need
fire
that
piece.
clarification.
Yeah, that would apply to a number of things in the construction project.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna call the question on number 1, and we gotta do the two of them separate, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
All in favor? Opposed? No, carried, thank you. And number 2 is that the corporate officer of the City of Nelson be directed to file a notice with the Land Title and Survey Authority of British Columbia stating that the resolution has been made in accordance with Section 57 of the Community Charter by the City of Nelson relating to land at 758 Highway 3A in Nelson, BC, legally described as District Lot 372, Kootenay District Plan EPP 92722, PID 030876664, and further that information respecting the resolution may be inspected at the office of the City of Nelson on normal working days and regular office hours.
I'll move
Moved by
with the
Councillor-
amendment as last time.
With the same amendment?
Yeah.
I would say, in this case, this second property owner clearly knew what was required, clearly chose not to comply.
Fine.
And give us the wording for the amendment, so we're all clear on it?
And finally, that the fees associated with removing the notice on title be waived in the future if work is completed to remediate the deficiency.
Yeah.
Questions or comments?
We're setting a precedent by waiving fees here, just FYI. That's we're setting a precedent by waiving some of these fees.
Well, we waived them on the first one.
Yeah, and I'm hearing loud and clear that we shouldn't waive them on the second one, but we are setting a precedent, just.
Fair comment. Maybe there's not a seconder for it.
So who's the mover and seconder on this?
Well, I'm moving it.
Yeah, seconder. We don't have a seconder
For the amendment.
for the amendment. Okay, so as read originally, mover and the seconder, Councillor Charlevoix, Councillor Renwick, all in favor? Carried, thanks very much. Thank you, thanks very much, Chief.
Come here.
Thank you for coming and letting us know your thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Okay. Professional permit to practice policy. The City of Nelson employs professional registered belonging to engineering and geoscience of British Columbia, requires all organizations engaged in a professional engineer and geoscience to meet obligations on the Professional Government Act. You're going to tell us more about this, aren't you?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I don't have a presentation, but I'd be happy to provide a brief summary of the request for decision that's before council. There's been recent changes in legislation with regards to governance of professional practice in the province of British Columbia. One of those changes is that engineers and geoscientists BC require a permit to practice for all organizations engaged in the practice of engineering or geoscience. With this permit to practice, there's a number of requirements, including the development of a permit to practice management plan. The City of Nelson has obtained a permit to practice through Engineers Geoscience BC and developed a permit to practice management plan. As part of our process in developing these tools to make sure that we're compliant with the new Professional Governance Act, Director Innes and I felt that it would be prudent and good practice to develop a policy that set out clear expectations and guidelines around the commitment of the City of Nelson to, and the registrants that are employed by the City of Nelson to meet those legislated obligations. So before you is policy, which outlines the basics of our commitment to maintain that permit to practice, assign responsible officer, responsible registrant, and develop and maintain a permit to practice management plan.
Okay, so does somebody want to move the motion?
I'll move it, then I have a
Okay.
question.
Second.
Mover and seconder.
I'll
Two
second.
questions, one from Councillor Morris and Councillor Lochinvar.
So I read through that, and I kind of, as a professional that has to have a license to practice, I was just trying to go through this, and I know that all these colleges and registration boards are under a lot of pressure these days to change and upgrade. Does the City of Nelson own this permit to practice, or is this now what they're calling the license for the person that's registered to practice their trade? Like, is this, do you own your license, or does the City of Nelson own your, like, I guess I'm perplexed by the words of permit to practice.
Yeah, and that's the primary change that we're addressing with this policy is, prior to the adoption of the Professional Governance Act in February of 2021, in British Columbia, there was no requirement for organizations to hold a permit to practice. It's actually fairly common in most jurisdictions across Canada for organizations to have and hold a permit to practice. I know personally I held the permit to practice in the Northwest Territories for the organization I was working with there, and every drawing received a stamp from the organization as well as the professional registrant who did the design. That is what the new legislation is trying to address, and is expecting that the City of Nelson as an organization holds a permit to practice.
Okay.
And I personally, as a registrant and Director Innes, also have our professional stamp and have our own obligations as registrants to the association.
Okay, so just to follow up, just so I can get this really crystal clear, you have a license to practice. Do you pay yearly dues to a body? Do you to the?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I pay annual dues to the engineers and
And
geoscientists of BC.
And now the City of Nelson will potentially pay dues to that same organization to have the permit to practice?
That is correct, yes.
And do we, as part of your employment, pay your registration fee?
Yes, you do. And you also pay the permit to practice registration fee.
Yeah, by default,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, crystally muddy clear, as the mayor would say.
And just to let you know, that's any professional. You know, I'm a CPA, so is Chris Jury, so is Amy. So we all belong to professional associations. But we don't. You know, the difference is they practice. They're doing engineering drawings and those, whereas we're not out doing audits for companies. If we did do that, then that would change it, right?
So
For CPAs.
one last one on this, because now I'm hearing about 2 stamps on a document. So I'm the engineer, like when we built our house, I had to have an engineer, engineer the back wall, because I wanted a wall, not a step. And, he stamped that. Now, the city is gonna also stamp something like that within there, or are we double, you're kind of saying like it's gonna be double stamped now.
So my apologies. I was giving you an example from the requirements of the Northern Association of Professional Engineers and Geoscientists. The Professional Governance Act is not requiring an actual physical stamp from the City of Nelson as an organization. They require us to have a professional practice management plan that obligates us as an organization to support the professional registrants through upholding ethics, professional development, maintaining proper records, and field checks and other sort of good quality management practices in the
Okay,
practice
so
of
we're not
engineering.
gonna be stamping within the city another engine, like if we have an external engineer that comes in to do a project here, we're not then, you know, kind of looking over the shoulder and then stamping again to, guarantee that that engineer knew what he was doing when he put his stamp on there.
That is correct. Other registrants would have the organization that they work for have their own permit to practice. So this permit to practice covers the professional registrants employed by the City of Nelson and any contractors. So let's say we hired on a contract an engineer who was working, and they weren't working for anybody else. They were working solely for us. Then there would be an expectation that our permit to practice, that they would be following our permit to practice management plan.
Perfect, like it,
Scott,
thanks.
on that note, before I get to Councillor Loughlin, on that note then, if we had an engineer as an example, say from a jurisdiction that didn't require this, how would that work then?
You're not allowed to practice engineering in the province of BC without being registered with Engineers and Geoscientists of British Columbia.
Right.
So if a consulting firm is working across the country, any members that do work in BC must register with EGBC.
Okay, so just to be clear then, if we had a contract to build a bridge, it would have to be stamped by somebody that's registered in British Columbia.
That's correct, yes.
All right. Councillor Loughlin, go ahead.
So Scott, in our professional practice management plan, one of the things I'm interested in hearing about is, I'm assuming that you said it includes professional development, so ongoing training. In the UK this year, in Europe in particular, but certainly in the UK stands out, it was a 1 in 1,000-year event that might turn out to be 1 in 5-year events in terms of the heat dome, melted airport tarmacs, melting roads, collapsing and failing bridges, and so on and so on. In our professional practice management plan, are we prioritizing a development and understanding of the consequences of heat, massive heat effects, wind events, rain events, what the implications on our built infrastructure are, on hydro and so on? How does that fit into our professional practice management plan? Are you going to look at what might become maybe the primary professional development issue for you?
Yeah, so the permit to practice management plan is primarily an administrative guideline to ensure that registrants are maintaining professional competency and including professional development. What those competencies and development include is not directed in the management plan. It just directs that it must happen, and it must be the registrant must remain current with things that they are actively engaged in terms of as an engineer. So if there was some aspect of climate change that any of our registrants were directly engaged in, then there would be an expectation that they would have gone to training or self-educated or sort of gained the knowledge in order to be able to apply those principles of sustainability or whatever that they're applying to their designs from some competent source.
Right. Okay. Great. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Rick. And I think, Colin, that's happening right now, isn't it? With, as an example, water runoff and retaining walls and some of that thinking's happening, right?
Sorry, just so I can be adjacent to the microphone. Yeah, within one of the requirements of the permit to practice is that we stay current with guidelines that are issued by the Engineers and Geoscientists of BC. So the Engineers and Geoscientists of BC will look at things like climate change, and they'll provide guidance documents that we are then to be aware of, and that is one of the things that this plan is saying, that Scott and I have to remain current with these things. We can't just have the association publishing documents and meanwhile he and I stay current with our schooling that we had originally, that we have to stay abreast with what the developments in the field are. So for something like climate change, there would be a professional guidance document that presents that. There could be a whole variety of different ones. There's a lot of different engineering and geoscientists or geoscience work that occurs, but
under the permit to practice, Scott and I have to remain current with ones that are pertinent to our fields of practice.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Any further questions? Hearing none. All in favor? Carried. Thanks very much. Thanks,
very
Scott.
much.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Colin.
Thank you, Colin.
Go home now and stay current, okay?
Oh,
Read
pretty
those.
funny joke telling that to the head of Hydro.
You read those.
He just has to
Good
plug
catch.
in. He just has to plug in and he'll be current.
Any more dad jokes around the table? Cal?
No, I'm not touching that.
I'll keep that.
No, I got
Oh, come on.
Up next is Nelson Transit Exchange, and we've been through this a number of times. BC Transit was successful in its grant application under Invest in Canada Infrastructure Program to bring new transit exchange to the city of Nelson, BC. Transit has worked with city staff to develop and design for the transit exchange on the 300 block of Victoria Street as previously presented to council. Staff are now requesting the council authorize staff to enter into a project agreement with BC Transit for a new transit exchange.
Move.
Nice to see the bulk of this is being paid for by somebody else. Councillor Woodward, Councillor Lochtenberg. Questions or comments? Councillor Renwick.
I just want to be clear. I would like staff to answer
I'll be
this.
current, you mean?
You know, I want to be clear that because we have not heard back from BC Transit on the loading zone, the crosswalk, et cetera, on the plan. Correct? And that is yet to come.
We were not into detailed design at this stage. That would be when you get into detail, they'll get into
We were
those
actually
specifics.
fairly deep into detailed design.
We
with
were
the
pretty
meetings of the,
Yeah.
And those notes were taken.
Yes, but I'm just making sure because,
Yeah.
okay,
And that's
For the
fair.
record.
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Renwick. Further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Thank you very much. Okay, Mayor and Council indemnity. Mayor and Council remuneration. Council remuneration review, staff have reviewed the council remuneration and determined whether it remains competitive relative to the comparable municipalities. Staff are now presenting the results of the review to council along with the recommendation for consideration. And there's a fair bit of information here, and there is a staff recommendation. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Lochtenberg and Councillor Charwood. Questions or comments? Councillor Woodward.
So, I'm not sure if anybody else is gonna comment on this, but, you know, this can be a pretty touchy subject because we are setting the next council's remuneration. And I read this piece thoroughly, and I guess I just wanted to put it out to council about the effect of that we've just been through 2 years of pandemic, and that it's been a hard time for people, and I'm just wondering about what council feels about this. I felt a little unsure of moving forward. So I guess I'm just asking for discussion on this topic. Maybe people don't want to discuss it, but I was just wondering what other people felt as they read through this.
So Councillor Woodward, you're not telling us what you feel though.
It's your job.
Are we
Put up your
comfortable with the
hand.
increase?
I mean, it's a touchy, I feel it's a hard thing. I felt like as I was reading it, it's a challenging thing, and I'm really thankful.
Make an adjustment to it.
Well, I'm very thankful for what the staff did. They did a really great job. They looked at a lot of examples, and I guess I'm just feeling a little bit gun shy about the adjustment, considering what we've been through. You know, as a town. I'm just gonna leave it there, I guess. I'm just feeling, I just wanted to know if there's discussion out there.
So did you want to make a motion to leave it as is then?
Oh, we've got one on the table.
Do you want to amend it?
Do you want to amend it?
And you could look at timing when it becomes effective. That would be other option. If you're worried about pandemic, you might want to say
I guess I'm just
down
worried
the road instead of next year.
I guess I'm worried about public perception. I think it's a if the pandemic hadn't happened and we hadn't as a town, we hadn't been all through what that brought to us.
I'd suggest if that's the concern, then you look at delaying the implementation till
$100
some
a
period
month.
of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
$100 a month.
minor
Yeah.
compared to, and there has been substantial savings on travel, and we anticipate some of that in the future with Zoom and those sorts of things.
That's true. Actually, I didn't consider that there would have been quite a bit of savings on the city's part because we didn't go anywhere as a council. So I didn't consider that. Thank you.
Yes, so you never did
Sorry.
tell us what you're thinking, but anyway, Councillor Lochtenberg, you tell us what you're thinking.
I feel compelled to help Councillor Woodward out here.
I was enjoying watching him struggle, but okay.
Have a look at the agenda from top to bottom. And if you're dealing only on public perception, we probably wouldn't have made any decision tonight. So,
No,
And I'll offer something after.
As someone, I have no trouble, standing before the public on this one because I think the amount of work that goes into this job and the remuneration is there's a big disconnect, I think, and I think this job goes way beyond these meetings. It goes beyond even the prep for the meetings. It's a constant mile. Like I think every Sunday I get a call from Councillor Woodward or another councillor to share thoughts, and it's an ongoing thing. And I think on that front, in terms of just the dollar per hour, I would really want the next council to not have to be struggling for every spare dollar they can just to make this job work. So I think what's been proposed here is totally reasonable. It's below inflation. The impact on the city budget, given that this council's worked really hard over the last 4 years to hold tax increases to zero, I think 1, and then this year was, in an election year, was courageous enough to go up to 4 and do the hard things while still really trying to respect the taxpayer. And so, since I have no particular stake in this, I think for the next council, I think it's more than fair that they at least don't fall farther behind inflation in the CPI. So I'm for it.
thanks very much, Councillor Lochtenberg. Councillor Page,
Well, if everyone's going to talk, I'll talk.
hey, do you want to ask what everybody else thinks, or do you want to?
No, I made myself clear, I think, earlier in this process that what was important to me was we arrived at a fair and equitable procedure to develop a number that made sense. I think what staff has presented in this report has accomplished that. We have arrived at numbers that put us in the medium of the basket that we have put together for remuneration, and I think these numbers are fine. It's barely a smidge up for council over that time, and the mayor makes a little bit more of a jump, but at the end of the day, it comes down to the process and how do we look at it and who are we comparing ourselves to and why are we comparing ourselves to that. And what I saw inside of the report gave me faith and assurances that we went through a rigorous process to develop this, and we're leaving behind a procedure for future councils that is just not going to be as fraught with the dynamics of this difficult discussion as it may have been in the past. So I think we've done some good work here, and I would commend staff on this particular report, and I think it's fine.
Okay, anybody else?
No, I'm not touching this one.
More details?
What
I'll
fraction?
hit you. So I'll throw in a detail. So, I if I may, Mr. Mayor, I think that changing how we do the council remuneration, there was a need to change that up, and I think that we made that change, and then we sent staff away to do this task, and this is where we've landed. And while everybody sort of talked about the pandemic and whatever, also remember that, you know, some people are going to look at these increases and they're going to look at the number of what the increase is this year, but we also have to consider that in year 2, we took 0.
Right.
And had we taken the CPI, which I think was 2.1, I think we gave, well, we didn't, the excluded staff didn't get it.
Right.
But if we had taken that 2.1 and then it had been compounded over these last 3 years, this difference here would be
Bigger.
smaller,
Oh, smaller.
right? Because we would have made, so they've used this number based on
Oh,
what we're making currently,
Right.
but we haven't had the compounded
Right.
effect of CPI for that 1 year that you missed. And the rule of thumb kind of out there is that when your increase in wage isn't as much as whatever the CPI is, you're falling behind. I mean, this isn't supposed to be our primary jobs. We're a small community, but we're a complex community. So I think that having a pay that's in a scale in comparison to other communities of our size and our budgets of our size also has to be taken into consideration. So when you're looking at that number, the actual increase, had we not made the decision that we were going to respect that the community was under strain and that we were not going to be taking what would be naturally factored in to the wage scale here, as it is for our unionized employees and stuff on a year-over-year basis, the actual increase would have been less had we done that. So talking about points that Councillor Woodward that you've raised and Councillor Lockenberg that you raised in terms of the compensation and looking at how these numbers are generated. So it's always tough to talk about your paycheck if you're the guy that's, you know, running again next time. This was not easy when we made substantive increase in the previous council I was on. It was a substantive
jump.
increase to sort of bring things up, particularly councillor salaries, I think.
16 to 25 or something.
Yeah, it was from 16 to 25. It was a substantive increase, and probably, you know, it wasn't a good decision for some people that are around the council table. But I think that it also brought more people on. I mean, I heard Councillor Woodward say that at 15, like he's always been interested in it, but at 15, the time commitment wouldn't allow him to have that. And now it's at a level where we can hopefully encourage more people, younger people, a more diverse group of people, perhaps, to be able to contemplate coming to the council table. And that's really what we want. We want to have representation of all of the people that live in Nelson here at the table. So those are my thoughts.
So I assume you're voting yes.
Yeah, but
Okay, with that, let's call for the vote. All in favor? Carried. Thanks very much. Next up is reports, if there are any. We're getting a little bit late tonight, but accounts payable, the Rusty Moose is gone.
It's back.
Rusty Moose, really?
No, out of
I
respect
usually
for
notice those
McClure,
things.
out of
I actually
respect for
drove-
McClure, we retired the Rusty Moose.
I
from the
drove by it on
They
Friday,
call it
actually. I should have took a picture.
They call it Ace Courier Services.
Yeah. And the building permit stats and the accounts payable are all on here.
I'll move that, Mayor.
Move receipt of the reports. Councillor Woodward, second by Councillor Renwick. All in favor? Carried. Thanks, everybody. And with that, the motion, note of motions is gone. Late items, there are none. In camera release to public, there are none. A resolution to adjourn. Councillor Renwick, Councillor Page, all in favor? Carried. Thanks very much, you guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Oh, we're
And
still.
we'll resume. We have our
No,
in
we're
camera.
not
yeah,
going
we're
anywhere.
gonna go back in
I'm
camera.
talking to
Going
these
anywhere.
folks down here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Justin,
everybody.
thanks a lot, my friend.
Thanks, everyone.
Got more to do.
John, you lasted to the end.